How's Curtis today?
Curtis is good. How was David?
Dave is amazing.
Dave is amazing. Dave is making that up. So I'm supposed to pretend that this doesn't exist.
It
I'm going to have a very casual conversation.
it makes it
Personal
easier when you
things.
don't address them. But we forgive you because you're from New Life in the city. So
I am from New Life Ministries in the city, yeah, right in the middle of, can I please turn just a little bit? He told me don't talk to the crowd. So I'm from right in the inner city of Winnipeg, right on Maryland between Ellis and Sargent. So if you hear of anybody being stabbed or any gang warfare going on in the city, it's right around where we are. So different demographic than out here.
hopefully a different demographic than here. But I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of these things, because church at New Life is a lot different than church at EBC. Things going well there?
Yes. I'm going to brag. We just had a congregational meeting yesterday, and congregational meetings are tricky because as leaders, we want to lead and get through an agenda, but we're also sort of emotionally taking gauge of how the crowd is doing, and is anybody being ignored? Is anybody getting too much, time? And it went so well. So we welcomed more new members than people we had as members.
Good.
We approved our budget, we voted in new leadership, and just generally, people were just thankful. Like, we take time at our congregational meetings to just give thanks. How have you seen Jesus at work in the church? How have you seen Jesus at work here?
Yep.
And that's the tone of the whole meeting. Is like,
Great.
This is all the ways that God is active with us. So
Awesome.
it's fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah. How are things here?
Things are good here, depending on who you ask. So I think I've really enjoyed this series.
Yeah, you guys have done a neat stuff here.
Started off with sort of thinking about worship and what is worship, and understanding that it's more than just singing a song that we like. It's about committing ourselves to Christ. Had a great talk with Lori about that, and Norm and I talked about being more like Jesus. What's that look like? It's not just a band that you wear on your arm, but it's a lifestyle choice. Hilda told us a great story about her coming to Canada and what the church meant to her, and being grateful, having Thanksgiving in her heart. Andrew and I discussed what it means to have doubts. Is it okay to question God? Does it mean that you're not strong in your faith if you wrestle with some of the difficult things in life? And then when we thought about that, we thought, obviously we can trust the Bible and we can trust God. So what does that mean? We don't want to just keep it to ourselves. You want to go out into the world and share that. So Jen and I talked about extending the church walls. Luke and I talked a little bit about, what does it look like when you're out there, because not everybody agrees with you. So how do you get along with people who have different mindsets than you? Tim and I discussed the importance of integrity in that, like what you say needs to matter, and then you follow up by doing the things that you say. Still human, we still fail, but that's the important thing. And then we tackled a few difficult discussions on embracing grief. The world in general society in general does a terrible job of dealing with grief.
Awful grief.
Hiding it instead of dealing with it. And so Susan was very vulnerable and shared some really great points about how it's needed to share and to remember people's story and to move forward. Leslie and I discussed a little bit about what happens when you don't die, but you're looking for healing and it's not coming. And does God love you still? Does he care? And last week, Terry and I talked about the difference between men and women, and in relationships primarily, but how different that is and what that means for us. So
We actually talked about you guys last week at our church. Because I'm like, Dave and his wife are going to talk about being married, and the crowd went, really? That was not me. Anyway, the crowd was very excited that the two of you tackled that. So
yeah, and so this week I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the church and what if all of those things are true, right? We've tried to build a path through some of these concepts. What does that mean for the church? Like, we know Acts 2, right?
Yep.
They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They had fellowship. They broke bread. They spent time in prayer. And everyone was filled with awe of the things that God was doing. There was church. But we know that. That's a foundation. We're not going to turn away from that. But what does that mean for us?
Yeah, so I love Acts 2. So whoever's doing sound, is the volumes okay out there for you? Just give me a thumbs up if the volume's okay, because my volume goes up and down as I talk. I get all excited. What I love about Acts 2 is it's almost a thesis. This is how the church started, with this kind of community and this kind of involved in everybody's life, and the devotion to understand who Jesus was and what his message was and what it meant to apply it and live it out. This constant conversation revolving around practicing the teachings of Jesus. And that thesis then gets tested through the book of Acts. Can it continue? When you add 5,000 people who are from a different culture, can you still maintain it? When widows from the other culture are not being fed, can this still be maintained? When other cultures and the church spreads out from a single location and it gets reborn in other places, can this continue? And I love that idea of, in whatever context we're in, can this seed of the gospel, focused on Jesus, applying the lessons of Jesus, worshiping Jesus, trying to live it out together in a group, what does that plant look like here?
Oh, it's really important to understand that foundation moves into these tests to see what it's supposed to look like, because it seems like in our society what happens is we migrate to everyone being the same. Right? It's like we can't get along unless you're just like me. So unless you like the team I cheer for, unless you vote the way I vote, unless you do things the way I do things, we are sort of friends off. Not really. You're not an enemy yet, but you're just not kind of close kinship. And in the scriptures, especially in the book of Acts, that was really tested. They came from different backgrounds, financial, political, cultural, and yet they were still able to focus on Jesus and move forward, right? And it's important for us to be able to do that, because conformity is not the answer. Unity is not about everybody being the same. It's about us focusing on the one thing that matters, which is Jesus.
Yeah, so one of my favorite passages is in Ephesians. So I got notes just so I don't talk off the top of my head, because then anything can happen. And then I usually talk to the recording guy afterwards and say, could you take out that thing that I said?
Just to lay the setting, every time we have this private conversation at a coffee shop, he has notes. So you're not special.
And I often will grab my phone and go, that's brilliant, let me write that out. So Ephesians 2 has this great line, and I mean, you can, where was our time? It's a big passage, but it ends with, so I'm in chapter 2, he's walked through reminding the people that we were dead in our sin and we have been saved by grace. None of us are inherently born in the kingdom of God. We're all adopted in. And he reminds us that there are tensions that come when all these different people are being adopted into the family. And he even reminds them there was this, the Jewish group and the Gentile group, which historically had been at awful war with each other. And not just that one community didn't like the other, didn't want them around, but their whole practice of living was different. The Jews, they honored and followed the Ten Commandments to a T. And there's certain blessings that come when you live that way. Yep. But for the Gentiles, the Romans, that was not part of their worldview at all. Their sexuality was different, their family structure was different, their economy, it was so different. And that creates a certain hostility when, if you're in a Jewish family and you have been celibate your whole life and you've had one marriage partner and you've faithfully protected that marriage, and then people come into the church, and in the Greek culture, you had many sexual partners, and you had many types of different types of people tied to your family. Yeah. And there was a sense of one group saying to the other group, "That's not how to live. We can't do that."
And in Acts, as you get into chapter 15, it talks about setting up the guidelines. There's certain things that are okay here, not a relative truth, but just saying, this is the situation. How do we work together for the sake of the gospel? Right.
So in Ephesians, after sort of setting that all up, he gets to this point in verse 14. He says, reminding, "For Jesus himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, that dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commandments and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to those who were far away and peace to those who were near. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. So he's building a new humanity. This isn't about individual salvation. This is restarting. You could sort of look at it as restarting the planet. Adam and Eve, so restarting with a new people. And then he says, so consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers with each other, but fellow citizens of God's people and members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a temple to the Lord. And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. So imagine in all the chaos of the earth, and then you go up and there's all these clouds, and then above the whole thing there is this temple. And the temple in the Bible is, temple anywhere, is where the gods meet with people. That's what temple is. And so the God meets with people in temple. And in this temple are all these diverse people coming together, no one who naturally belongs there. We're all adopted in, and we're finding our giftings, finding our usefulness, finding what makes us unique, and working to complement it with everybody else for a single purpose of serving Christ's agenda and his gospel. And so there's a sense of, if someone was to go to Jesus and say, so what are you about? What's the good news? What do you do? That Jesus would say, see that group? That's what I do. All these warring parties, they've stopped warring, they've come together, and they're not trying to be just like each other. They're taking their uniqueness and trying to knit it together into a single fabric and work together for my purposes. Like, this is stunning stuff. And like, governments around the world would love to have access to this, where warring parties come together. People serve when their uniqueness for a united common goal. So that's what Jesus is doing. So in that way, the church has nothing to do, like, it's not for us. It's for him. So when Jesus is talking to Peter in Matthew 16, and he says, upon this confession I will build my church. It's I will build my church. It's not I will build your church. You will build your church. I will build the church. It's Jesus saying, I will build my church.
Right.
And so we're servants, and we all serve this greater agenda, which is showing the world, oh, this is what Christ does. He brings all our warring parties, all our differences, and knits them together into one. That's stunning to me.
It's stunning mostly because we rarely see it, right? Because what happens is we come in with agenda, we come in with what we want out of it. How many times have you seen people who come in and they want this to be the case or that to be the case, and then they go because they find it somewhere else, whatever, right? And that's fair. Like, everyone has a choice of where they want to serve or where they want to. Yeah. But the idea behind it is that we focus on something bigger than ourselves, right? So as you focus on that, what do you see? Do you see yourself or do you see the whole, right? And it's hard because we're all going to start from that perspective.
Yep.
We're all going to start with what we're looking for. You go to a church because it has a great youth group or choir or whatever it is, and that's fine. But what is it that you're offering, not just what you're receiving, right? And so when you think about the early church, they were the ones who stepped into the void that was there because people were arguing with each other, that were fighting with each other. Instead, they looked at, see, what does God do in this, and what are we then going to do as a result, right?
Yep.
And I think that's difficult for us to get past what we, and it's not a point and fingers thing, right? Like, I have difficulty with that sometimes when you're trying to figure out where you're supposed to go, what it's supposed to look like, how you develop it, how you lead people in that to stretch them to be doing that naturally, not just doing what they're told, because it's a whole organic thing, right? And many times what happens is we get part way, and then personalities get involved, or agendas get involved, or something else happens, right? And we're at loggerheads together. It fascinates me that when you look in the scriptures, when Jesus talks to the disciples, he uses himself as the standard, not each other at their best, right? So when he talks about loving one another, he talks about loving one another as I have loved you. It's a new commandment. Why? Because it's not like do your best. It's not try hard. It's like love like I've done for you. And then all of a sudden you take your eyes off yourself, put them on Jesus and go, well, how did he love me? Oh, he did this, or he accepted that, or he's made me change this, or whatever. And then you live that way, and then you see difference in people's lives, right?
Yeah.
Those love one another passages aren't for what we get out of them. They're what we're offering to each other.
Yeah, but it's hard. And there's an aspect of church that is just about learning patience. So at New Life, we have incredibly diverse demographics. Like we just have one from every category you can imagine. And to learn in our time together to, encourage others to take steps forward in their walk with God, but also allow them to be patient, allow them the grace for them to stumble and be where they are. That's tricky. Because it's okay for a short period of time,
Yep.
and then after a while it's like, okay, we've hit this for a couple months now. Can we get going? So when we have we have different service leaders in our church, and they have very different styles, and two of them I really appreciate.
Yep.
And one guy, he's from another culture, and he tells his stories in a circle,
Yep.
and they're beautiful. They're so honest. But I'm like, can we speed the circle up a little bit? Like
Yep.
I heard you.
Tighten it up.
Right, but for me to say that's who he is,
Yep.
he's not doing anything wrong. It's just not what I would prefer.
Yep.
How do I, stop being worried about whatever it is I'm worried about and let him be who he is, and listen to what he's trying to tell me?
And trust that he's doing the same for you.
Oh, absolutely,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what he's,
Right.
being patient about.
Probably nothing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's sort of like coaching, right? When you're leading, what happens is they do well sometimes, they poorly sometimes, and they're generally not either of those extremes, right, in their journey. They're usually along the path, and they're doing well sometimes and poorly sometimes, and you've got to encourage them when they're down and hold them back a little bit when they're too proud, right? And just, this is the path, this is where we're going. Continue to follow in the Spirit to say, this is what God wants us to accomplish together. How do we do that? Because walking a path on your own and walking it with somebody else is completely different.
Yeah.
You go at different speeds, you do different things, you see different stuff because you're doing it in community rather than just on your own. And part of the beauty of church is that we come together to do the journey not on our own, like do it together, right? And so, but that does mean that we have these sort of differences that have to be dealt with moving forward.
Yeah, but again, that's the point, right? It's learning to get along with each other isn't an aside to be in church together. It's the center part of the story is that we are learning to become one, that oneness, and that just takes work. So Phil Putz, do you guys remember Phil Putz, the regional minister from 2 times ago? When I started, he said one of the things that he's noticed that causes tension in church is where family dynamics, the way you behave at home, you bring that behavior to church, and people don't react the same way. Like people don't, you're a parent and you treat your kids a certain way, you go to church and you treat people the way you treat your kids and it doesn't work. Or you treat people the way you treat your spouse and it doesn't work. Because people at church, I'm not your spouse, I'm not your kid, I'm not your employee, I'm not your employer, I'm not even always your best friend. I'm an equal. And so we have to figure out this equalness, even if I come from radically different perspectives. And at times, what I have in me, you need to learn from. And so, and vice versa. You have things that I need to learn from, and I have to learn to serve you, and I have to learn to let you serve me. Like this whole equality thing is just a whole other realm. So in church, when we get together at New Life, one of the beautiful things is giving people who've never had a voice in society equal voice. Because one of the things about people in generational poverty is they live under the power of the government, under the power of whatever's caused them to become in the situation they're in. And so they don't feel like they've got a voice. And so to come at church and say, you have equal voice, you have equal access to our microphone, You have equal access for sharing your thoughts. When we finish a sermon, we always discuss it together. So you have equal permission to share your opinion. And that's just part of our practice to say, you are equal here. And then some of us are more mature in our walk with God, and so we want to help.
Yep.
But that doesn't make us greater than.
No.
Like that's a great practice.
Definitely, yeah. But it's also that you're trying to figure out how to draw that out of people, right? And so that they can then live together. So you think about the way you treat people at home, and then you come here and it's different. In some ways it should be different, right? And in other ways we can learn from each other how to do better at home necessarily,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yeah.
It goes both ways. So, but also as you're figuring that out, there has to be a submission, there has to be a sacrifice, there has to be a humility, there has to be like, all of us need to be looking at Jesus more than we're looking at ourselves or at each other, right? Because we bring those processes in, those incorrect processes. In the world, what we do is when I disagree with you, I quote somebody who agrees with me, or I bring in somebody who agrees with me, and then you, right, ante up on both sides, and then we shoot across, and all we're doing is harming each other instead of helping each other, right? And so as we try to focus, what does the Bible say? What does the Spirit lead? What do we, as a group, believe about whatever it is we're talking about? And then are we willing to look past what we think to what is right to figure out where we are supposed to go from there, right? But in the world, what we do is we just pile on.
Yep.
And in the church, we're not supposed to be doing that, right? But we bring that in,
Yep.
and we do that naturally, right?
Yeah, I like that. Because the church isn't even, like, we're not all friends, right? Like, if we think church is about all of us being friends, it's hard to be friends with sometimes, like, being friends with people implies that you're hanging out and you're playing together, and that's very good. But I don't naturally click with everybody. Sometimes my job is to love you as you are, as an expression of my love for God.
Sometimes the platonic intimacy is deeper when you don't like them, but you still serve them.
But you're serving them, right.
Yeah.
And to say, I'm not doing it because I'm your friend, I'm doing it because God loves me, and I want to show my love to Jesus, so therefore I'm going to love his servant. I'm going to serve his servant.
Jesus says that on the Sermon on the Mount, right? Yeah. Like he's like, you love your neighbor, you love your friend. Well, good for you. Like even the pagans do that. Love people that don't offer you anything, right? Give to those who cannot give back to you, and see then that God's love flows through you, right? And when you think about that, and many times what happens is we break off into these shoots of denominations of people of like mind, and then we think that that is the truth of each, right? Instead of looking and saying, what is the differences that God can unify properly? So you think about the disciples, right? There's vast differences in the disciples. We don't see that because their focus is on Jesus. But you have a tax collector and a sinner. You have urban and rural. You have older and younger. You have richer and poorer. You have all sorts of...
Yeah, you have a tax collector and a zealot.
Yeah.
So pro-Rome, pro-Israel.
And 3.5 years together, and not one recorded story about them having a discussion on politics, right? Why? Because it's unimportant? No. But Jesus is their focus.
Or the writers were like, I can't document that. I forget it. We're just going to take this on. Right. So, but going back to where you started about loving each other, John 13, where Jesus says, this new command I give to you, love each other. One of the incredible parts about that passage that we miss is that it's given in the context of sadness.
Right.
They're having this dinner together, and Jesus starts by saying, one of you is going to betray me. And they're like, what? Yeah. And Judas would not have been the guy at the far end of the table. He'd have been one of the best friends.
He's not the one they suspect. Like they didn't hear that and then turn and point.
No,
right?
he was in charge of the money, so he was like trusted best friend, good guy. Yeah. So, you're at a table and someone suggests that your best friend is going to betray you. Yeah. Like there would have been confusion. Yep. And then he says, I'm going to leave. And I'm going to die. And they're going to rise up against you. And you're going to actually betray me. And like there's this sense of what is happening to our world.
Nothing's making sense. You've seen him raise people from the dead and somehow he's going to die.
Right.
And then he's leaving you and you're, right? How do we
And you're
deal
the
with
way.
Yeah.
We've been following you for 3 years. Yeah. You're the rabbi and you're leaving. And so there's so much grief and sadness and heaviness. And then he says, this is the command I give you. love each other.
Yeah.
And it's not love each other because everybody is oh so lovable. It's they need you to love them.
Yeah.
They're hurting so much. They're so confused. They want to get this gospel working in their life, but they're tripping. They need you to love them.
Yeah.
So it changes how we hear that passage. And then he says, love them like I loved you.
Right.
Not the way your mom loved you or your best friend loved you,
Yep.
the way I did.
And so what happens is we have to, and that's why we've tried to paint a path here through some of these questions,
Yeah.
is, if we understand what it means to grieve, what it means to doubt, what it means to question, what it means to work through some of these things, and you have the vulnerability, you have the safety net of being able to trust people, that you can share how you're really feeling, that they will love you and pray with you and work with you through it, not just drop you because you're different or you're not as mature as them or whatever it is. So when you have that, you can redefine what it means to be a community.
Yep.
And that's really what the church is, right? So the church is the koinonia, it's the fellowship.
Yep.
But the fellowship used to have a definition before it was used by the church. And that was just a group of people that came to meet about a certain thing. And now it means something deeper than that because Christ is the center of it.
Yep.
And as we step into that, with this in mind, focusing on Christ who is the source and center, then we have the opportunity of redefining it for each other, right? And for a world that needs Jesus. So as we focus on that, it's like, okay, so what is the confusion? What is the hurt? What is the pain? What is the vulnerability that people are going through? In churches today, we don't know because we don't spend the time, we don't have the trust, and we're not willing to open up to say, this is bothering me. And then you don't have the solution because you don't know what the problem is. And so you end up hurting people inadvertently.
Yeah. And so that's, we've talked about shaming. So we had an incident at New Life a couple weeks ago where someone came in who was a guest, and at the end of the service in our sermon discussion time, she came up and shamed us. She indirectly insulted me, insulted how we do worship, but did it in a shameful way. And it sort of sent all of us reeling for about a week. And since then, I've been thinking about what is this issue of shame, because if church is a place where there's a risk where someone will publicly attack you, publicly expose your fault, publicly just shame you, then everyone has to be perfect so that doesn't happen. And
Right.
and of course none of us are perfect, so we're lying.
Right.
And then we're hiding. And so then the gospel can't get in. And Jesus removes our shame. Scripture's clear. He removes our shame. He forgives our sins. So if church is a place where shaming happens, we're actually going against what Jesus is about.
Of course. Didn't set this up, but the very first usage of shame in the Bible is in the garden, and it's from the result of truth being hidden and shame occurring, and then the solution that man gives is covering, right? Is hiding. They hide, right? And God then comes and opens it up and gives them access, and then the shame is dealt with. And that's how we're supposed to be doing it, but we don't do that because we don't know how, and most of us are too busy hiding because we don't trust each other, right?
Right, and so then you've got to take the steps to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about vulnerability is it requires so much strength. And people, it's like, being vulnerable, being weak, that's very bad. No, it takes tremendous strength to lay your life open and let people know you, love you, step in. There was a phrase decades ago that was like, came from a church in the States that said, you will never become a rational adult until someone loves you irrationally.
Okay.
That idea of you've got to be a mess and full of problems and have someone go, oh, I can love this. I can love you through this. That's needed for you to start growing up.
And I think it's important to remember that it's not across the board, right? Like, I don't have to be a mess to everybody in the church, like all 100 people, 200 people, 5,000 people.
That's not.
It's a unique journey with different people depending on the depth of the relationship with them, right? But the openness, the opportunity for that to happen should be explored, right? Yeah. And we do it to our detriment when we don't, because the purpose of the church, and I like what you said at the beginning, we'll close with this, it isn't about us.
Right.
It's about him. It's about his glory. It's about reaching people with the gospel. It's about becoming more like Jesus. And when you think about church in that atmosphere, you have the opportunity to look at each of the opportunities or each of the situations as a way to do that, right? So I disagree with this. I don't like that. I love this. This is wonderful. We should do more of that. Assess those accurately to the scriptures, to the Spirit's leading, to say, is this really the direction? Just because I like it doesn't mean it's great. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not good. Just because, right? And then access what the scriptures say about these so that we can say, this is where we should be going, and lean into the vulnerability of it, right? So that we can offer trust. So if you're on the other side of somebody being vulnerable, don't treat that with disdain, right? Like, respect that and help with that so that you can grow from that. Well, it might be messy because it's new for us,
it will be
right?
messy,
But our desire should be to move forward.
Yeah, but in the messiness, there's great humor. Like, if you learn to just kind of laugh at, oh golly, this is what life is like, what a mess. That's beautiful. And there's something about, like, programs, church programs are very helpful for discipleship. It's very helpful for aligning people to work together. But there's also something about saying, what can I do to help whomever?
Yeah.
You know, and to sit in a crowd and, you know, you hear prayer requests, or you hear stories, and just say, is there anything I can do to help whatever's caught my attention? And just, like, what do you offer? And it's so just natural to who you are, and then you're building authentic friendship, and with authentic friendship, you can get deeper into the shared life. Right. And then suddenly it's co-vulnerability.
So, and if it's not something that comes naturally, then make it something that comes naturally to do that, right? And then step into that, right?
Lean into it,
Because if we don't lean into that, then nothing changes. I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a hoot.
Thanks, just you and me having a conversation. It's been great.